I grew up in the 1960s. We had one television in the living room, and when there was a black face on television, people would literally run out of bedrooms to the living room to see what was going on. And unfortunately, they were often fleeting images.
We just wanted fairness and equality, and that's what we fought for. And that's where United Church of Christ was a godsend.
It is no exaggeration to state that the Office of Communication literally invented media advocacy at the federal regulatory level.
The Office of Communications really defined what the public interest means in broadcasting with the WLBT case.
You really have to go back to the 50s and 60s to understand the importance of this case. There were 2 television stations in Jackson and 2 newspapers. The newspapers were absolutely dreadful, while the TV stations weren't that much better.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last!
Martin King came along and was so heavily supported by the Board for Homeland Ministries, and he talked to us about how they were being treated in the South on the stations, and I went down and went from town to town and watched, and we decided we had to do something.
National stations were putting out broadcasts that dealt with the civil rights issue, but the stations in the South, they'd black out a national broadcast and claim that they had cable trouble.
We found that there was such a terrible situation in Jackson, Mississippi with WLBT. It had a KKK bookstore on the property, and it discriminated terribly against blacks. It was the NBC outlet. It's the most powerful station in the Mid-South.
I'm glad that the United Church of Christ did choose WLBT, but I think that it will always be a significant case because it reflected some things that were not only going on here in Jackson, but the attitude in the South generally.
They had a children's program, and we asked the NAB to send a letter to all broadcasters asking that romper room should be integrated. If they had sent that letter, I probably wouldn't have gone any farther.
In 1964, Dr. Parker arranged a team to monitor the TV stations to see exactly what they were doing.
The monitoring process was really set up through Tougaloo College.
We had the monitoring study, and we then presented it to the FCC and asked that they hold a hearing. And then they sent a letter saying that we did not have standing. At that point, we sued the FCC.
I think Dr. Parker was a very courageous man to do what he did. It took tremendous courage in those days to come in and put together the kind of research effort it took to challenge this license here. And you really were endangered coming down here doing it. You were taking your life in your hands, literally. He could have been murdered for what he did.
When the license challenge, the petition to deny, was filed, nobody gave the church a chance to win. This was a classic David and Goliath fight, and like the story in the Bible, David won.
One of the first things that happened after the lawsuit was over was the Romper Room show was integrated. This was no small event in Jackson, Mississippi in 1971.
At the end of the 10-year fight for this permanent license, a majority black-owned group was formed that got the permanent license. And Aaron Henry, who had once been denied airtime on this station because he was black, became chairman of the board.
I think the United Church of Christ's Office of Communications stepping into the WLBT case was probably one of the most instrumental things that have happened in the broadcast industry.
When they realized that you could take the license away from a TV station, when you realized that that great economic power could be lost because of the way you're treating black people, then it really had an impact. Things really started to change when it hit the pocketbook, and people got the realization that we can't continue doing this. We've got to change our ways.
I never dreamed of being in broadcasting. I had many dreams. But as I look back on it, those dreams were all inspired by what I saw. Most children think they can do something because they see someone doing it and they think they can be that person. But no dreams of broadcasting. Not any. But for Reverend Parker and people who were involved with the civil rights movement who knew that the airwaves were the property of the public and that they should serve all of the public regardless of race, color, creed, or station.
Up next in Medical Matters, new technology that helps doctors better detect heart disease.
Anywhere I go in America, I'll occasionally see TV, and in a large number of places, I will see a minority person. They probably take it for granted that you should have that kind of, quote, balance in your reporting. But it's there and can't be taken away, and that's a victory for all Americans.